Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you are somewhere really comfortable right now.
Yeah, hopefully totally relaxed.
Right, exactly. I'm talking about the kind of comfortable where you can just sink into a chair, maybe dim the lights a little bit, grab a blanket, pour yourself something warm.
Set the mood.
Because today we are going to a place that feels, well, it feels a little bit like a late night campfire chat. You know, when the fire's dying down and the conversation gets really deep.
And a little bit like a high-end intellectual salon.
Yes, but where the guest of honor just happens to be a disembodied consciousness.
That is a very specific vibe you are curating, but honestly, for the material we have today, it fits perfectly.
It really does.
Because we are looking at a document today that is equal parts mind-bending metaphysics, the kind that makes you just stare at the ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And strangely enough, incredibly practical advice for hobbyists.
Right. I mean, it is the only place I know where you can learn about the fundamental nature of time, the architecture of the afterlife, and then pivot immediately to getting very specific tips on oil painting varnish in the same hour.
It's quite the tonal shift.
It really is. So for the uninitiated, or the learner, as we like to call you, we are cracking open the archives today. We are looking specifically at session 424 of the Seth Material.
And specifically for those tracking the bibliography, this comes from the early sessions bookbind.
Right.
And just to ground us in our own linear timeline for a second, the date of record here is Monday, July 29, 1968. It is exactly 9:00 p.m.
I love when we have the timestamp. It really
Yeah.
anchors the whole thing.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene before we get into the heavy stuff.
Good idea.
Where are Jane Roberts, the medium who speaks for Seth, and her husband Rob, the scribe? What is the energy in the room like that night?
Well, the energy is really interesting because they have just returned from a vacation. They were at a place called Enfield Glen. It was a hiking trip, a time to completely disconnect from the daily grind of psychic work and writing.
Because Jane had been dealing with some pretty significant health issues physically leading up to this, right?
Exactly. So this session is the first one back after a long break. There is a sense of returning to the work, but with fresh eyes. They are relaxed, the windows are probably open. It's summer in upstate New York in 1968.
But there is also this undercurrent of anticipation.
Definitely.
And the mission for this deep dive is pretty wild. We are going to explore Seth's definition of time, which, spoiler alert, is not at all what we are taught in physics class.
Not even close.
We are going to look at the mechanics of how dead people communicate,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is way more technical than I expected.
Highly technical, yeah.
We're going to tackle a massive paradox regarding healing that I think applies to almost every problem in life. And then, yes, we are going to get technical painting advice from the spirit realm.
It really runs the gamut. And just before we dive in, a quick housekeeping note for you. This audio is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Right.
Our goal here is to explore the ideas contained in the source material, not to preach them. We are impartial observers unpacking the suitcase.
Exactly. We are just the tour guides. We didn't build a museum.
Well said.
So let's start with the heavy hitter first. Time.
Time, the big one.
Before the session even officially starts, Jane gets this flash right, like a sudden download of information.
She does. It is about 8:55 p.m., just 5 minutes before they sit down at the table. She gets this intuitive hit, a packet of information that time is intensely personal, that we create it.
That is already a huge departure from how we usually talk about time.
It completely flips the script.
Because we usually talk about time like it is a river or a container. We are in it. It flows past us. We can't stop it.
Right, we say things like, time is running out, or I don't have enough time.
But Seth immediately dismantles that.
He creates a completely different definition. Let me pull up the quote because it is foundational to everything else we are going to discuss.
Go for it.
Seth says, time is the pattern of perception. To you, then, time is the result of your perceiving mechanisms.
Okay, we need to really chew on that. A pattern of perception.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean in plain English?
Think about your physical senses for a moment. Your eyes, your ears, your nervous system. They are designed to take in data.
Right.
But if you took in all the data of the universe at once, every event, every sound, every possibility, past, present, and future simultaneously, you would be overwhelmed.
You would burn out instantly. It would be too much signal.
It would be just white noise, absolute chaos. You wouldn't be able to function.
So your nervous system acts like a filter.
Exactly. Or even a blinder. It arranges experiences in a row. It says, okay, first we will experience breakfast.
Yeah.
Then we will experience the commute.
Yeah.
Then we will experience the meeting, one thing after another.
So Seth is arguing that this sequencing is time.
Yes. It is not an external reality out there in space. It is an internal organizing tool used by your brain to make sense of existence.
I love the analogy of a camera here. If time is the result of our perceiving mechanisms, it is like the frame rate of a camera.
That is a great way to visualize it.
If you shoot at 24 frames per second, you get what looks like normal cinematic motion. If you shoot at 60 frames, it looks different. If you take a time lapse, hours compress into seconds.
The camera creates the time of the film. The film doesn't exist inside time. The camera's mechanism generates the experience of duration.
Now,
Seth is essentially saying that we are the camera. Our consciousness is the shutter.
so if we change the camera, change our consciousness, we change time.
Theoretically, yes. And this isn't just theory for Seth. This leads to a fascinating point he makes about his own experience.
Right, because he has a very unique perspective on this.
He does. He says that because he has lived physical lives, he has been human, he has walked the earth, he's been a merchant in Denmark or a scribe in Rome, he understands our time.
It is meaningful to him.
Yes, he gets it. But he mentions that there are other parts of his entity, his greater self, who have never been physical.
This part blew my mind. He says to them, our time is highly alien.
It creates a massive communication gap. Imagine trying to explain the concept of waiting for a bus to a being that exists in a state where everything happens simultaneously.
The concept of waiting or duration or later would be nonsense to them.
They would look at you and say, why don't you just be on the bus now? Why are you standing there?
It's like trying to explain the concept of being wet to a fire. It just doesn't compute.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But Seth bridges that gap. He talks about how he explains it to these other parts of himself. He uses this specific term, mental osmosis.
Yes. Mental osmosis. It is how entities understand realities they haven't experienced directly.
Yeah, but they don't have to go down to Earth and be born.
No, they don't have to pay taxes and wait in line at the DMV to understand human life. They can absorb the understanding from the part of the self like Seth who has done those things.
It is, okay, let's try another analogy. Imagine if I went to medical school. I do all the studying, the residency, the sleepless nights, the stress.
I'm following you.
And because we are connected on some deep level, you just absorb the expertise. You get the knowledge without the trauma of the all-nighter.
That is the dream, isn't it? I'll take the degree, hold the student loans.
Exactly.
But it suggests a level of connection between consciousnesses that we barely understand. We think of ourselves as walled-off islands. I am me, you are you.
Right. We are so individualistic.
But Seth sees us as interconnected parts of a larger whole where experience is shared property.
It changes the definition of identity, doesn't it? If experience is shared, then who am I?
You are the focus point of a much larger lens. And Seth, being Seth, can't resist the dad joke even when discussing high metaphysics and identity.
I know exactly which part you mean. He loves a good pun. He's got that dry, slightly professorial humor.
He is talking about these non-physical parts of himself, and he says, those portions of my entity that have not had physical experience, however, do not operate within that time system at any time, if you will excuse the pun.
At any time.
It's a ghost pun.
It is, but it serves a purpose, doesn't it?
It does. It reminds Rob and Jane and us not to take this too solemnly. We are discussing the architecture of reality, but we can still giggle about it.
It humanizes the source.
It shows that humor survives the transition out of physical reality. Humor implies perspective. You can only laugh at something if you can step back and see the absurdity of it.
Speaking of that transition, if time is just a perception tool for us down here in the physical world, what happens when we leave? What happens when we die? Do we stop talking? Because talking takes time. You have to say one word after another.
This brings us to part 2 of the deep dive, the mechanics of how the dead speak. And you hit on a crucial point. Speech is a time-based phenomenon.
Right. If I say hello, he happens for the hello. There is an interval. It's linear.
Seth gets very technical here. He says, word structures and language itself bears a unique mathematical precision.
Mathematical precision.
It is connected to our nervous system and the intervals between thought and action. In the physical world, there is a gap between thinking I want an apple and actually grabbing the apple.
Words fill that gap. They are the bridge.
Exactly.
But when you die, there's no nervous system, no gap.
Eventually, yes. But Seth describes a transition period. He introduces a concept called thought words.
Thought words. That sounds like a sci-fi term. Can you define that for us?
He says that those who survive death can use words if they want to. They are far freer with them. but for a while they use thought words. It is like an intermediate stage.
So you are thinking in language, but you aren't vibrating vocal cords.
Right.
It sounds like, have you ever had a dream where you are talking to someone, but your lips aren't moving, yet you hear the conversation clearly?
That is a perfect example. It is telepathy that still dresses itself up in English or French or whatever language you spoke.
It's comforting. It's familiar.
It is. But Seth says this is just training wheels. He says, as proficiency grows, the necessity for even thought words vanishes.
So what replaces it? Is it just emojis?
In a way, yes. Much more high-definition emojis. He says communication becomes direct. Images are widely used. These images would be fourth-dimensional. They are far from flat. They have a reality.
Thought forms.
Exactly. Instead of saying the sentence, I am sad because I miss my house, you would project a multi-dimensional image structure.
Oh, wow.
It conveys the house, the feeling of loss, the memory of the smells and the lighting and the nuance all at once.
So it's instantaneous.
It's holistic. The receiver steps into it. They experience your meaning rather than just hearing it and trying to decode it.
That sounds incredibly efficient, but also overwhelming.
How so?
If I feel sad, I just feel sad. But if I am projecting a 4D sculpture of my sadness, that's a lot of exposure.
And that leads to the emotional landscape Seth describes. This is one of the most comforting parts of the session for me, but also one that requires a shift in perspective. He says that in this non-physical state, feelings become far more vivid, pulsating, and alive.
Which again sounds scary. I mean, intense grief, intense anger, without a body to buffer it. That sounds like a nightmare.
But here's the kicker. Seth says you can experience these intense feelings without fear because you realize they are not you.
They are not you. That is a very Buddhist concept.
It is. In physical life, we get swept away. We say, I am angry. We identify with the emotion.
Right.
In that state, you recognize emotion as a phenomenon you are experiencing, like watching a storm, but your identity is indestructible. It cannot be swept aside.
So it is like being in a storm, but knowing you are the lighthouse.
I love that.
The waves are huge, they're crashing, they are vivid, but they can't knock you down. You can actually appreciate the power of the storm because you aren't afraid of drowning in it.
Precisely. It suggests that the afterlife isn't this dull, gray, peaceful sleep where everyone plays harps on clouds.
Which honestly sounds a bit boring anyway.
It does. It is more vivid, more emotional, more loud than life here. But you have the stability to enjoy it. It's high intensity living without the fragility.
That is a really beautiful thought. It makes the idea of shedding the mortal coil feel less like an ending and more like an upgrade to high definition.
Like going from a black and white TV to an IMAX theater.
An upgrade where the buffer isn't needed anymore. You can handle the raw data.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of buffers and bodies, we have to talk about Jane. Because while Seth is dropping these truth bombs about fourth-dimensional communication, Jane Roberts, the human woman, is recovering from a pretty rough time physically.
Yes. This is the saga of Rupert's health, as Seth calls it.
Just a reminder for you listening, Rupert is the name Seth uses for Jane's greater identity.
Right. He sees her as a male energy in the grand scheme of things, though she was female in that lifetime.
And the context here is that Jane had been sick. They went on this vacation to Enfield Glen. She did a lot of hiking, and she started to feel better.
But before the session, she did something major. She wrote a letter.
She wrote a letter to Harry Edwards. For those who don't know, Harry Edwards was a very famous spiritual healer in England at the time.
He was known for distant healing. He was like the rock star of spiritual healing in the 60s.
And Seth makes a big deal out of this. Why? Is it because Harry Edwards is magic? Or is it something else?
It is less about Harry's magic and more about Jane's psychology. Seth points out that this letter represents a massive advancement.
Because she was a skeptic.
You have to remember, Jane was a profound skeptic. Even though she was channeling Seth, part of her struggled with the idea of survival of personality. She was always questioning, is this just my subconscious?
Which is irony at its finest, considering she spends her evenings dictating books for a dead guy.
The irony was never lost on Seth. But for her to write to a spiritual healer, someone who claims to work with spirit doctors, was her admitting, okay, maybe this is real, and maybe I deserve help.
It was a cracking of her rigid skepticism.
Exactly.
And this leads to what I think is the philosophical anchor of this deep dive. Seth drops a paradox that I have been thinking about all week. It applies to so much more than just health.
I know the one. It is the alone versus together dynamic.
He says, nothing is ever really done alone. And nothing is ever done unless it is done alone.
It is basically a Zen koan. Nothing is ever really done alone, and nothing is ever done unless it is done alone.
Let's break this down. Because this applies to everything, not just healing. It applies to your career, your art, your relationships.
Let's look at the alone part first. Seth says, the recovery itself was utterly dependent upon his belief in it. He is talking about Jane.
Jane had to do the internal work.
She had to shift her belief from, I am sick, to, I can be well. No one can do that for you. A doctor can give you a pill, a healer can send energy, but if you are blocking it with a belief in your own illness, it won't land.
So that is the nothing is done unless it is done alone part. You have to open the door. You have to turn the key.
Exactly. You are the gatekeeper of your experience.
But, and here is the together part. Once you open that door, you are flooded with help.
Seth says, when you say, I will do this myself, you are speaking with a limited idea of identity.
Because we are connected to everything else.
Right. He mentions that Harry Edwards and his spirit team will add their mental and psychic energy to Jane's.
He even mentions the healing qualities of nature, right?
Yes, specifically the water at the Glen. He says natural water has healing qualities. He even mentions that Seth had a heart-to-heart talk with Jane in a dream she barely remembers.
I love that detail. She wakes up thinking I slept okay, but actually she has been in a nocturnal therapy session with her spirit guide.
It illustrates the point perfectly. Jane felt like she was hiking up that mountain alone.
But the water was helping, the fresh air was helping, the spirit doctors were helping, Seth was helping.
She was supported by the entire universe, but she had to take the steps.
It is empowering and humbling at the same time. You have to do the work, but you don't have to carry the weight of the world.
It's a balance.
It's like building a house. You have to sign the contract. It's the alone part. But once you sign it, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters all show up. That's the together part.
That is a fantastic analogy, and Seth points out that in Jane's specific case, unbelief of spontaneity was the cause of the illness.
Unbelief of spontaneity. She was too rigid.
She was controlling the hiking, the nature, the asking for help. It was all about letting go.
Letting go, it sounds so simple, but it's the hardest thing we do.
It is. Seth notes that the morning after his dream chat with her, she actually felt worse for a few hours. He calls it a temporary fear of letting go.
Wow.
We cling to our problems because they are familiar. Health, happiness, freedom. Those can be scary if you are not used to them.
That is a truth bomb right there.
Yeah.
We cling to the familiar, even if the familiar hurts. We'd rather be comfortably miserable than uncomfortably happy.
But she pushed through. She climbed the mountain. And Seth says that physical activity distracted her conscious mind, the worrier, so that her inner self could do the repairs.
So the lesson there is sometimes you just need to go for a walk and get your brain out of the way.
Distract the ego so the soul can breathe. Yes.
Okay, so we have covered the nature of time as a perception tool. We have covered the mechanics of the afterlife and 4D communication. We have covered the psychology of healing and the paradox of needing to be alone to be together.
It's a lot of ground.
You would think the session is over. You would think Seth would say, good night, sleep tight.
But he doesn't. And this is where the deep dive gets weirdly specific. This is my favorite part because it comes out of nowhere. It is jarring in the best possible way.
I love this part so much. It is like, imagine Einstein finishing a lecture on relativity and then saying, oh, by the way, your souffle needs more nutmeg.
It is exactly that. The session pivots instantly. Seth says, first, give me one moment here. This is for you. Do not use sepia with too heavy a hand.
Sepia, the color, the paint.
The paint. He is talking to Rob now. Rob is an artist, a commercial artist and a painter, and suddenly we are in an art critique.
But this isn't Seth's advice, right? Seth isn't a painter.
No. Seth acts as a telephone here. He says the message is from your other friend. He is referring to a personality called Van Elver.
Van Elver. Tell us about him.
Van Elver is a personality that Rob had channeled and painted previously. He was supposedly a 14th century Belgian painter, a very distinct character.
Right, so we have a 20th century artist, Rob, getting advice from a 14th century artist, Van Elver, via a discarnate entity, Seth.
That's the setup.
And the advice is, you are using too much sepia.
And Rob is caught off guard.
Rob is completely surprised by this.
Rob admits that he had recently noticed an undesired purpling effect in a head study he was painting in oils. He hadn't told anyone. But he confirms that brown sepia was involved and it was making the flesh tones look weird.
So the ghost was right.
The ghost was right. But it gets better. Van Elver doesn't just critique, he offers a solution.
He suggests a new technique.
He says to use thin layers of sepia mixed with white to create a sunny, clear effect. But you have to use a specific varnish.
And this is where the comedy ensues. Because Seth, who we just established is a master of consciousness and time, Cannot figure out the name of this varnish.
It is a comedy of errors. It's like a game of charades. Seth is trying to translate a concept from Van Elver into Jane's vocabulary. He starts guessing. He says, aqua acromont.
And Jane and Rob are baffled. Rob shakes his head and says, nope, never heard of it.
Seth tries again. A kind of varnish made near Akron, Ohio.
Akron, Ohio. That is so specific and so mundane.
It is. Rob starts listing the classic varnishes. Damar, mastic, copal. These are the varnishes Van Elver would have known in the 14th century.
Seth rejects them all. Finally, Rob suggests synthetic polymer or acrylic.
And Seth metaphorically lights up.
Right.
He says, is there an acrylic varnish? Rob confirms there is. And then Seth nails it. Made by permanent pigments in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati.
So Van Elver, a guy who painted in the 1300s, is excited about a synthetic acrylic varnish manufactured in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1968.
This is significant. It is funny, but it is deeply significant. Why does this matter?
It matters because it shatters the idea that the dead are frozen in the time period they lived in. We tend to think of ghosts as historical reenactors.
Stuck wearing heavy velvet and speaking in Old English.
Right, haunting the castle not knowing what a smartphone is.
We think they're static.
Right.
Like a loop on a tape recorder.
Exactly. But this implies that Van Elver is keeping up with the trade. He is looking over Rob's shoulder. He is checking out the new supplies at the art store.
He is still an artist.
He is still passionate about technique. He's excited about the new tech.
It humanizes the afterlife in a way that golden harps and clouds never could.
It really does.
It suggests that if you love something, whether it is painting or coding or gardening, that passion survives. You don't just become a generic spirit, you remain you.
And you remain curious. That is the key. Van Elver is learning about acrylics. He is experimenting through Rob.
It also shows the collaboration Seth talked about earlier. Nothing is ever done alone. Rob thinks he is painting in his studio alone.
But he has got a 14th century Belgian guy hovering over him, going easy on the brown. Rob, it is getting purple.
It changes the feeling of creative work, doesn't it? The idea that we are surrounded by a gallery of invisible mentors. It makes the artistic process feel much less lonely.
It really does. So we have gone from the mechanics of the universe to the chemistry of varnish in Cincinnati.
Which is the hallmark of the Seth Material. It refuses to separate the spiritual from the physical. It says it is all one thing.
The varnish is spiritual. The time perception is practical. It is all valid.
I think that is why this session number 424 is such a gem. It covers the spectrum. It really respects the complexity of being alive.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we are creators. We create time with our perception. We create our health with our beliefs. And we create art with advice from our friends, both seen and unseen.
So let's recap the big takeaways for you before we sign off. What are the nuggets to put in the pocket?
Sure. I think there are 4 main ones to take away from this late night session. First, time is a tool. It is not a container you are trapped in. It is a perception mechanism your nervous system uses to organize reality. You are the camera, not the film.
That camera analogy is definitely going to stick with me.
Second, communication evolves. After death, we move from spoken words to thought words to direct fourth-dimensional image and feeling exchanges. It is an upgrade to high-fidelity emotional telepathy.
The thought forms idea.
Third, the healing paradox. You must do the work yourself. That's the belief part. But once you do, you are never alone. Help arrives from everywhere, nature, people, and spirit.
Build the house and the plumbers show up.
Exactly. And fourth, passion survives. The things you care about your craft, your hobbies seem to follow you. You keep learning.
And you might even get excited about varnish from Ohio.
Especially if it solves the purpling problem.
Exactly. Now, we always say this, but it is especially true here. Do not just take our word for it. We are just scratching the surface of what Seth said in this session.
Please go to the source. Read the books. This session is from the Early Sessions Book 9. The Seth Material is published by the New Awareness Network.
You can find the books, audio recordings, and a treasure trove of information at their website and bookstore. That's sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
It is dense material, but it rewards the effort. Every sentence has layers.
And as we wrap up here is a final thought for you to chew on in the dark.
If a 14th century painter can get excited about a technological advancement in 1968, what is happening right now in our world that has the dead absolutely buzzing? What passions are you cultivating today that are strong enough to survive your own physical time frame?
Are you building something that you will want to check in on in 500 years?
That is the question.
Keep those vibes relaxed, keep your sepia light, and we will see you in the next deep dive.
Good night.
Good night.